Once upon a time, in the bustling city of London, there lived a curious and adventurous man named Lemuel Gulliver. Gulliver was a physician by trade, but he had a deep-seated passion for exploring the unknown. His heart yearned for the open seas and the promise of new lands and strange encounters. Little did he know that his dreams would lead him on an extraordinary adventure unlike any other. Gulliver's first great adventure began when he joined the crew of the ship Antelope, setting sail for the South Seas. The voyage went smoothly for some time, but one night a violent storm descended upon them, tossing the ship like a toy in the waves. The crew fought valiantly, but the storm was too powerful. The ship struck a rock and shattered. Gulliver, clinging to a piece of wreckage, was swept away by the sea. When he awoke, Gulliver found himself on the sandy shore of an unknown island. Exhausted from his ordeal, he tried to sit up but discovered he was unable to move. To his astonishment, he was bound by countless tiny ropes, and his body was pinned to the ground. As he looked around, he saw dozens of tiny people, no more than 6 inches tall, swarming over him and staring at him with a mix of fear and curiosity. These little people were the Lilliputians. The Lilliputians took Gulliver to their emperor, who resided in a grand palace, minuscule by Gulliver's standards, but splendidly adorned. Despite his initial fear, Gulliver treated the Lilliputians with kindness, and they soon saw that he meant them no harm. They fed him, although their food portions were minuscule, and provided him with a large shelter, which he adapted to suit his needs. Gulliver learned the Lilliputian language and quickly became a favourite at the emperor's court. He discovered that the Lilliputians were engaged in a bitter war with the neighbouring island of Blefuscu over the correct way to crack eggs. The Lilliputians believed that eggs should be broken on the small end, while the Blefuscudians insisted on breaking them on the large end. This seemingly trivial dispute had led to countless battles and much suffering. To demonstrate his goodwill and loyalty, Gulliver offered to help the Lilliputians in their war against Blefuscu. With his enormous size, he waded into the sea and captured the entire Blefuscuian fleet by pulling their ships ashore with a rope. The Lilliputians were overjoyed and celebrated Gulliver as a hero. However, not all Lilliputians were pleased with Gulliver's presence. Some viewed him as a potential threat due to his size and strength. Political intrigue and jealousy festered at court, and a faction of nobles plotted against him. They accused Gulliver of treason and conspired to blind him and starve him to death. Forewarned by a friend, Gulliver decided it was time to leave Lilliput. He made his way to Blefuscu, where he was warmly received by the emperor. There, he discovered a large boat that had washed ashore. With the help of the Blefuscudians, he repaired the boat, stocked it with provisions, and set sail, hoping to find his way back to England. Eventually, he was rescued by a passing ship and returned home, where he was reunited with his wife and children. Despite the dangers he had faced, Gulliver's adventurous spirit was undiminished. After spending some time at home, he set out on another voyage, this time aboard the ship Adventure. On this journey, Gulliver found himself shipwrecked once again, this time on the coast of a land called Brobdingnag. In Brobdingnag, the situation was reversed. Gulliver was the tiny one, and the inhabitants were giants, towering over him at 70 feet tall. As he explored this new land, he was discovered by a giant farmer who scooped him up and took him home. The farmer's family was initially frightened of Gulliver, but they soon grew accustomed to him. The farmer's daughter, Glumdalclitch, took special care of Gulliver, treating him like a cherished pet. She made clothes for him and carried him around in a small box. The farmer, seeing an opportunity to profit, began exhibiting Gulliver in markets and fairs, where crowds gathered to see the tiny man. Gulliver's fame reached the ears of the Queen, who was intrigued by the tales of the miniature man. She purchased Gulliver from the farmer and brought him to live at the royal court. Gulliver was given his own comfortable box to live in, and Glumdalclitch accompanied him as his caretaker. The Queen treated Gulliver with great kindness, and he quickly became a favourite at court. Living among the Brobdingnagians, Gulliver learned much about their way of life and their perspectives on politics, morality, and society. The giant's straightforward and practical way of thinking often made Gulliver reflect on the follies of his own society. The King of Brobdingnag, in particular, was a wise and benevolent ruler who valued justice and the welfare of his people. Despite the Queen's protection, life in Brobdingnag was not without danger for Gulliver. The vast size of the inhabitants meant that everyday objects and creatures posed significant threats to him. He narrowly escaped being crushed by a careless servant, nearly drowned in a bowl of cream, and was even attacked by a giant wasp. Each day was a struggle to survive in a world where he was so vulnerable. After many narrow escapes, fortune favoured Gulliver once again. One day, while he was resting in his box, a giant eagle swooped down, grabbed the box in its talons, and carried it off. The eagle eventually dropped the box into the sea, and it floated on the waves. Gulliver feared he would drown, but by a stroke of luck, a passing ship spotted the box and rescued him. The crew was astonished by Gulliver's tale, but they welcomed him aboard and cared for him until they reached England. Once again, Gulliver returned home, his mind filled with the extraordinary experiences and lessons from his travels. Despite the dangers he had faced, Gulliver's wanderlust was undiminished. After spending some time at home, he set out on another voyage, this time aboard the ship Hopewell. On this journey, he found himself cast away on the island of Laputa, a flying island inhabited by people obsessed with mathematics and music. The Laputans were an eccentric people who lived in a world governed by abstract theories and complex calculations. Their island floated above the ground, controlled by magnetic forces, and could be moved at the will of the king. However, their obsession with abstract ideas often left their practical affairs in disarray. Their houses were poorly built, their crops failed, and their servants were neglected. Gulliver spent some time among the Laputans, trying to understand their bizarre way of life. He was then allowed to visit the land below, called Balnibarbi, where he saw the disastrous effects of the Laputans' impractical experiments. The fields were barren, the towns were in ruins, and the people were impoverished. Gulliver met with a few practical-minded individuals who tried to repair the damage caused by the Laputans, but their efforts were often thwarted by the ruler's obsessions. Continuing his journey, Gulliver visited the island of Glubdubdrib, where he had the astonishing opportunity to converse with the ghosts of historical figures. The island was ruled by magicians who could summon the spirits of the dead. Gulliver spoke with famous philosophers, scientists, and leaders from history, gaining unique insights into their lives and deeds. In Lugnag, Gulliver encountered the Struldbrugs, people who were born with a mark on their foreheads that signified they were immortal. Initially, Gulliver envied their eternal life, but he soon discovered the curse of immortality. The Struldbrugs continued to age, becoming increasingly decrepit and miserable. They were shunned by society and lived lives filled with endless suffering. Reflecting on their plight, Gulliver realized the blessings of a natural lifespan. Finally, Gulliver visited Japan, where he was treated with respect and courtesy. The Japanese were fascinated by his tales of his travels, and they provided him with a ship to return to England. Gulliver's mind was filled with the extraordinary experiences and lessons from his travels. Gulliver's final and most profound adventure took him to the land of the Houyhnhnms, a race of intelligent and rational horses. After a shipwreck, he found himself on a remote island where the Houyhnhnms lived in a peaceful and orderly society, governed by reason and devoid of lies, deceit, and malice. The Houyhnhnms lived in simple harmony with nature, valuing truth, friendship, and benevolence. They were astonished by Gulliver's tales of human society, which they found filled with irrationality and corruption. In contrast, the Yahoos, who resembled humans but were brutal and uncivilized, served as a stark reminder of the worst aspects of humanity. They were filthy, savage creatures who fought and stole without reason or restraint. Living among the Houyhnhnms, Gulliver came to admire their way of life and grew increasingly disillusioned with human society. He saw the Yahoos as a reflection of the basest instincts in humans and longed to remain among the rational and noble Houyhnhnms. He tried to adopt their mannerisms and speech, hoping to be accepted as one of them. Despite his longing to stay, the Houyhnhnms ultimately decided that Gulliver, being a Yahoo, could not remain in their land. They believed his presence was a threat to their peaceful society. Heartbroken, Gulliver built a small canoe and reluctantly left the Houyhnhnms. He was eventually rescued by a Portuguese ship and brought back to England. Back in England, Gulliver struggled to readjust to human society. The pettiness, greed, and deceit he saw around him were unbearable after the purity and rationality of the Houyhnhnms. He became a recluse, shunning the company of other humans, including his own family. Though he loved his wife and children, he found it difficult to reconnect with them and often spent his time in solitude, reflecting on his incredible journeys. Gulliver's travels had changed him profoundly. He had seen the world in ways no one else had, encountering tiny people, giants, floating islands, and wise horses. His adventures had taught him about the vast and varied nature of humanity and the many ways societies could be organized. Though he struggled with the flaws of human nature, he carried with him the lessons of wisdom, compassion, and the pursuit of reason. And so, Gulliver's travels came to an end, but the tales of his adventures lived on, inspiring countless others with stories of bravery, curiosity, and the endless quest for understanding. Gulliver had seen the world and its wonders, and his remarkable journeys served as a reminder of the vast and varied wonders of our world.